Hello, my name is Adrian Goldberg and welcome to the Byline podcast from the Byline Times. The Byline Times, it's what the papers don't say, what radio doesn't report and what telly doesn't tell you. This time, Trump fought the law and Trump won, for now anyway. The US Supreme Court has ruled that former presidents have some immunity from prosecution. They can't be tried for what are deemed to be official acts carried out as part of their executive duties. As you might expect, though, the devil here lies in the detail. Was the pressure Trump applied to colleagues and officials to reverse his 2020 election defeat part of his official duties? We'll have to wait and see now until after the next election in November. Were the 34 offences he committed in the Stormy Daniels hush money case in 2016 part of his official duties? Well, presumably not, as he wasn't then yet president. And the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has said the claim to have the conviction struck down is, and I quote, without merit. But they've also said they'll delay sentencing while Trump files new legal arguments, all of which means that Donald will be free to take on Joe Biden in November from outside a prison cell. Let's talk to Heidi Siegmund Cuda. She runs the wonderful Betty Dangerous Substack and co-hosts the Rad Pod. We're also joined by former Washington Times journalist Tom Carter, who has been writing about Leonard Leo. Leo is a Catholic conservative legal activist who assisted Judge Clarence Thomas in his Supreme Court confirmation hearings and then campaigned for another 5 judges to sit alongside him. He did so successfully. So that's 6 Supreme Court judges he has helped to reach their position. And guess what? Trump's presidential immunity was backed by 6 judges to 3. Funny that. Let's speak then to Heidi. And Heidi, Joe Biden's obviously pretty angry about this. He says the founding principle of the US Constitution is that unlike England, you didn't have kings when the Constitution was founded. Nobody should be above the law. The Supreme Court appears now to be contradicting that.
Adrian, it is so good to see you. I'm so happy to be here with you and Tom. Yes, as you just explained, the Supreme Court has taken the President of the United States, a democratically elected representative of the people, and turned him into a monarch. And you have a million pundits on TV right now looking at the minutia, but they're missing the bigger picture. The rich and the powerful are stealing everything. And quite frankly, and I know Tom is going to back me up on this, the Supreme Court, as it stands right now, is actually trying to kill Americans. They've taken away women's health care. They've taken away our environmental protections. They've put machine guns back in the hands of a radicalized populace. So the Supreme Court themselves are acting as if they are above the law. And the bottom line is our Supreme Court has been captured. The way out of this is to ensure democratic governance continues in November, because then we can begin impeaching some of the members that appear to have been captured. Tom, do you have a point of view, or what do you think, Adrian?
Yeah, I do. Thank you very much for having me. One of the comments I saw online was yesterday the Supreme Court declared the Revolutionary War was a waste of time. And I think that's exactly correct. I mean, it's astonishing. I've seen videos this morning of all 6 of the Supreme Court justices that Leo put on the Supreme Court saying during their confirmation hearings, no man is above the law. And yesterday they said, oh, wait a minute, one guy is above the law. We're going to make him king. I agree with everything you said, including the blood on their hands, because they've put machine guns in the hands of crazies who are going into schools and murdering children. This is not just a simple legal battle, a tussle about laws. I mean, it has real life consequences. You mentioned the women who can't get health care and have to go to other states, or, have a miscarriage in a parking lot because the doctors can't treat them. One was put on a helicopter the other day out of Idaho because the doctor said, I'm not going to risk my career to give you an abortion that you need for your life. So, I mean, yeah, moved into a very strange time. And it doesn't look like there's any solution except a massive blue wave in November to reelect Joe Biden and put Democrats in charge of the House and the Senate and begin some structural moves to change the Supreme Court, to change the electoral laws, and so on and so forth.
Thomas, from a UK perspective, the whole process of the appointment of judges to the US Supreme Court seems very strange. We have nothing like that. So, of course, the judiciary is meant to be independent. They are meant to hold the Constitution above everything else. But even as we talk about Leonard Leo, who you have written extensively about, we're talking about a process which is intensely politicized.
Oh, yeah, that's correct. 30 years ago, Leonard Leo, who was an operative for the Federalist Society, a conservative libertarian legal group, realized that if conservatives were going to have their way with certain issues, primarily abortion, contraception, and gay rights, they would never win at the ballot box. In order for their position to prevail, they had to stack the courts. And Leonard began a 30-year campaign of creating a pipeline with Federalist Society fellows and getting them jobs, putting them in places. And ultimately, he put 6 on the Supreme Court. It's astonishing. I mean, from a lobbying perspective, I mean, nobody has anything close to it. I mean, the NRA, Big Pharma, Cuba, you name it. Nobody owns the Supreme Court like Leonard Leo does. And the interesting thing here is he put all extremist Catholics to one degree or another. They're all extremist Catholics, every single one of them. There's been a lot of talk about Protestant Christian nationalism and the evangelical Christian nationalism taking over the United States, but that's not what's happening here. The term is Catholic integralism. They do not believe in separation of church and state. And that's the goal, to create some sort of the closest way a European might understand it is Franco's Spain, which was very heavily influenced by the Catholic Church. And that's what they're trying to do here. And you have to give them credit. They've had an astonishing success.
I'm sure that all 6 of those judges would vigorously deny what you're saying, Thomas, and say that they defend and uphold the law as they see it, and they would very vigorously argue against the depiction that you've just put up there. But what you're describing, you've compared it to Franco's Spain, but it sounds like some kind of fledgling theocracy.
Yes, exactly. It's a Christo-fascist coup is what is going on. In The Guardian, I read an article just fairly recently written by a Holocaust survivor. And he said, if you want to steal the country, if you want to establish fascism, first you have to capture the courts. And that's what they've done. And yes, I think they would vigorously say, oh, no, we're originalists. We're following the original meaning of the founders. It's laughable. The founders came here to get away from a king who was not accountable by law. The king could do whatever he wanted to. They created a government where no one was above the law. And they said that in their confirmation hearings. Another example is they said Roe v. Wade was established law and they weren't going to touch it in their confirmation hearings. They completely abrogated their own words, their own positions during confirmation in order to basically do legal gymnastics and come up with the findings they found in this last session.
I want to quote something that Tom said in an article that I wrote for Byline Supplement in a Q&A I did with Tom about Leonard Leo. He said, "It looks like 1930s Germany to me." So if anybody wants to know what they would be doing in 1930s Germany, you're doing it. This is what's going on. And I'd like to bring it up to more recent times, because last night when I knew I was going to do this podcast with you, Adrian, I was looking at what Putin did when he came to power. what's one of the first things he did? He made it impossible to prosecute a sitting president. So they became lawless almost overnight. What happens now in Russia is that Russia's government exists to steal as much as possible for as long as possible. That is actually being duplicated in America under this captured court. And again, I don't want to leave people thinking that there's nothing that can be done. There's absolutely something that can be done. As Tom said, a blue wave can occur. But what has to happen under the next Biden administration is we have to immediately get to the deep structural reforms that are so necessary for democratic governance to continue. This Supreme Court just took away expertise. They just took away environmental protections. As you know, in autocracies, what's one of the first things to go? The expertise of scientists, historians, everybody that you turn to actually understand reality versus the propaganda that autocracies spew.
You're talking there, Heidi, about what was known as the Chevron precedent. And I want to break that down in some detail in a moment. It's another example of the Supreme Court abrogating powers to itself. But I must say a word about Joe Biden, because certainly the view from this side of the Atlantic was that he gave such a disastrous performance in the recent TV head-to-head with Trump that he should stand down and allow another Democrat to take his place. I know that's a view that's also been aired in parts of the United States as well. So you want a blue wave. Are you going to get a blue wave so long as Joe Biden is there?
Yes. What happened a week ago was information warfare. And this is something that I just wrote about. It's not a debate. It's politics as unusual. What we're witnessing is a veteran public servant bringing policy papers to a knife fight. In information warfare, people don't understand that it's not an equivalency between, you know, a lifetime public servant who's old and stutters versus a convicted felon who's a stalking horse for the autocracies around the world. And so I think that, yes, people saw a bad performance by Joe Biden, but what I think it took them a minute to remember is in the last 3 years, he has made us a trustworthy ally again. Prior to his administration, it looked like we were becoming part of an axis of evil. People had to realize that Joe Biden is the guy who's actually rolled up his sleeves, doing the work, put us back in the Paris Accord, all of that. But it took a minute for people to remember. It took a minute for them to shake it off. And we're in an information war. So obviously, some of the pearl clutching is real and some of it is exacerbated through information warfare.
Sure, but we're talking about politics here, aren't we? And if only 5% or 10% of the people can be mobilized against Biden because they feel that he will be incapable as president, that isn't just information wars, is it? That's something that's happening that is real on the ground that might actually change the outcome of the election. So there has to be a responsibility on Biden and the Democrats to not only be capable public servants, but also to present as capable public servants.
I saw yesterday Ralph Nader said where we are today with the Supreme Court and so on and so forth was Hillary Clinton. She was such a bad candidate. She lost, and therefore here we are today. At that time, it was but her emails, her emails, her emails. This time it's the debate, the debate, the debate. And yeah, I would like Joe to be younger, more spry, a little quicker on his feet. I used to have breakfast with him many years ago, not many times, but a few times when he was cracking jokes. He was great fun and so on and so forth. But at this particular stage, just the practical aspects, the logistics of changing 5 months out from Joe Biden to anybody else would mean an automatic loss in November. And so I think you don't change horses midstream. And we're this close, and it's going to be a close election. There's going to be a lot of disinformation, like Heidi said, and we just have to do the best we can and overcome it as best we can. Going back to the Chevron situation and the loss of scientific expertise, think about this. If judges can decide everything, when we have the next pandemic, for example, they will be deciding which vaccines people can and cannot use, whether they should or should not be wearing masks or flying. And the bigger issue here is it's basically a three-part thing. It's billionaires like the Kochs and the Scaife and the Uhlines and Berryside and so forth. They want no regulation whatsoever.
And these are people who fund various think tanks and fund various activists.
And not just think tanks, they fund various politicians, they fund various supposedly grassroots groups, all kinds of stuff. They want the Gilded Age. They want the world where there is no regulation, where they can do what they want, when they want, how they want, and that there is no taxation. The other part of that is, so basically they want to get rid of FDR's New Deal, which was Social Security and all the social safety net. They want to get rid of LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson's Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act, all of that stuff, wash it away and have the rich, the billionaires, their friends, do anything they want, anytime they want. And so it's very much that kind of a world where one group says, we need Social Security, we need worker protections, we need environmental protections, we need all of these sorts of social safety net and other kinds of things. The other side says, no, we don't need nothing. Capitalism will work it all out. And so it's Leonard Leo versus these guys.
And the Chevron deference, I think it was called, was created in 1984. I think I'm right in saying, when Ronald Reagan was president. And essentially it was a recognition by the court that the law couldn't account for every eventuality. So if in doubt, you would defer to the appropriate federal agency. So if there was water pollution and there was talk of a solution, it would be the appropriate federal agency that would deal with that. But recently the Supreme Court overturned that and said, no, if there are these grey areas in law, never mind the federal agency, it's the Supreme Court, this very conservative body, many of the judges, of course, as you've said, backed by Leonard Leo, that will in future make the decisions in these grey areas. The judges, not the experts. That's the point.
That's it. That's correct. These arguments have been going on, actually, in many cases, since the beginning of the United States. So it does go back to, states' rights versus federal rights. States' rights can be termed in a small sense as I get to do anything I want. It's my right. Versus federal rights, which is we're all in this together and we need to, have protections and help each other. So from the founding to the Civil War to today, it's the same stuff that's been being argued over for 250 years.
Heidi, here in the UK, we've sometimes over the years looked at the United States and kind of chuckled to ourselves and seen it in some ways as a very legalistic society, a society that is underwritten by a constitution. But that's also one of the United States' great strengths. That's something which has historically helped to keep it from authoritarianism, help keep it from fascism, because if there's something you don't like, you are able to go to law. So Joe Biden says that Trump now, if he is elected president again in November, will be emboldened. Anybody would be emboldened if they were told that whilst carrying out their executive duties, they are immune from prosecution.
Adrian, they are telling us what they're going to do. In an article I wrote titled MAGA Hat and a Gun, I actually do a deep dive on Project 2025. They are telling us what they're going to do. The Supreme Court is setting the stage for that very autocratic takeover of America. And I just want to push back on something, because you're right, this is politics, but it's not politics as usual. We are basically not choosing between two men. We are choosing between a Putin-run world versus the continuation of the post-World War II progressive world order, of which the United States has played a key role. So regardless of what anyone thinks about Biden, Trump, this is fascism versus democracy.
Heidi, you've referenced Project 2025. Tom, you've referenced Project 2025. What exactly is it?
Project 2025 is a 900-page manifesto created by the Heritage Foundation, which British listeners may know as the organization that is trying to sue Harry to remove his visas. That's the Heritage Foundation. But
Prince
for
Harry,
this,
yeah.
Prince Harry, for Project 2025 is 900 pages. It's a manifesto for how Trump or any Republican president, the next one, would run the country. They plan to fire as many as 50,000 government workers and replace them with Trump loyalists. They've laid out chapter and verse exactly the Christo-fascist world that they want to create. And back to Leonard Leo, Project 2025, there's 100 different groups involved. Leonard is involved with funding or staffing 50 of those groups. The Heritage Foundation is a fully owned, captured organization as much as part of Leonard Leo Inc. as the Supreme Court is. Leonard was given $1.6 billion in August of 2022 was when it was reported. I mean, $1 billion. I had to go look up and see how many zeros that was.
Yeah,
It's a lot of money.
Project 2025, which people are finally looking at and finally starting to take seriously, is a scorched earth hit list of democratic institutions. And it to me reads like a Soviet era how-to manual on the total annihilation of the US government and any critics of the regime, full stop.
They say specifically, we're not out to reform all these government agencies, the Department of Education and so forth. We want to destroy them. There's actually an office in Washington, D.C. right now making up a purge list of people that they want to get rid of. I mean, if that doesn't sound like Stalin, I don't know what does.
Deeply disturbing stuff. And I should say, by the way, if Leonard Leo is listening to this and wants to come onto the podcast and have his say, if any one of the Supreme Court judges wants to take issue with what Thomas or Heidi has said, we would welcome you putting your point of view as well. Just drop me an email to goldbergradio@gmail.com and we'll give you the chance to put your point of view ASAP. This has been the Byline podcast brought to you from Byline Audio. And before we go, just a reminder, we've got some fantastic free podcasts available, but you can also upgrade to premium and get added features as well. So we've got the Utter Bollocks podcast, wonderful stuff, funny myth busting with John Mitchinson and Otto English. We've got Travels Through Americana with Hardeep Matharu and Bonnie Greer. And we've got What If coming as well with Dawn Butler. So head over to bylineaudio.com to listen to our free content and possibly go on to upgrade as well. You can, for example, through the premium feature, listen to this podcast without ads. So thanks very much indeed to Heidi. Thanks to Thomas. I'm Adrian Goldberg. This has been the Byline podcast from bylineaudio.com. We'll see you again very soon. Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Byline Audio.